Happy Tuesday and welcome to Lacrosse Now. That is Travis Eldridge. I am Tom Eschen. Appreciate you joining us after the #1 versus #2 weekend. Plenty of takeaways from both of those games. One was a little better than the other, but that's besides the point. We're also, taking a look back at the weekend in the men and women's games too.
Yeah, and we've got Jack Hanna from Denver. Speaking of a good win, Denver with a big win over Ohio State, so we'll talk to him about that result. We've got some stock up, stock down in the women's game coming up later. Whose stock improved over the last week, who maybe took a step back, and, of course, we'll wrap up the week in college lacrosse on the men's side as well, which is what we're going to start with now.
Yes, but first we got to start with the headliner. The biggest games of the weekend were the #1 and #2 in the men and the women, and we'll start with Maryland, Virginia, and the men's side. Maryland, dominant. Biggest takeaway, Travis?
Complete control, the Terps. I mean, to me, the biggest thing that stood out to me was just the complete and total control Maryland felt like they had in the entire game. I had a game to do that overlapped by about an hour, so I was watching the second half, and it was the point where Connor Schellenberger scored, I believe, to make it 15-11. So it cut that Maryland deficit, that lead to 4. And at that point, I'm watching going, okay, this is where Virginia does what we noticed what they've done at times this year. I did their game against Towson, kind of got off to a slow start. Tigers led early, but Virginia does what they do. They go on a big run, they come back, they make it a game. So that's what I thought was going to happen. And Maryland instead finishes the game on an 8-1 run. Now, some of those you can tack on as, all right, well, Virginia is just trying to do anything they can do to score. So maybe it's not quite the thing. But that immediate response by Maryland to a big goal by Schellenberger where the crowd felt like it was in it. He's all pumped up. This offense feels like they're going. And they just never quite were able to get it turned around. UVA got dominated at the faceoff X. Luke Weirman going 24-36. And remember, it's not just Peter Lasala. Gabe Braun is a good faceoff guy that they've brought in that has been a nice change of pace from Lasala, and neither one of them worked for Virginia. And I think the other thing that stands out to me is the transfers for Maryland. You look at Donville, 3 goals, Kahn, 4 goals, 3 assists. The guys that were brought in for games like this to provide the depth of scoring and depth of, I guess you could call stardom, delivered for Maryland. This was a big-time game that, to me, left me thinking Maryland very well may be able to run the table and do this whole thing. And that is how good they looked.
You point to that point of the game. I'll go a little farther in the game, then I'll get to my takeaway in a moment here. I'll go to Maryland taking an 18-11 lead with 7 minutes and 40 seconds to go. UVA makes a goal to make it 18-12. This is midway, late in the fourth quarter. Maryland then scores 5 straight goals while up 18-12 to go on and win it 23-12. So this leads into what I think is that Maryland has something that they didn't have last season, and they have an edge to them. And you look at what happened last year, and that was the year of gratitude, it felt like, across the sport. Everybody was sort of just happy to be back out there. And, yeah, there was some, rivalries and things like that. And Maryland going into this year, you're like, well, Jared Bernhardt's gone, yet look at how well they're playing. And, yes, they bring in the transfers, as Travis had mentioned, too. That makes them stronger. But still, like, well, why is Maryland so much better this year than last year? I look at the intangibles, and that's that Maryland has that edge, which I talked about before the game. You lose in the title game. You got to come back. You're missing the best player, the Tewaaraton winner. How do you follow that up and go and win it again? I think they've got an edge that they didn't have before, and that final stretch showed that to me. And I think that you could say that some of the Ivy League teams have that edge too, because we had talked to Sam Hanley a few weeks ago, and he was like annoyed. He was like mad. He's like, we haven't been out there in 2 years?
Yeah.
Like, it's time to start implementing their well. And look who's at the top now, the Ivy League teams, and you've got Maryland up there too. Maryland has that edge that I don't think maybe they had as much of last year, because it was hard for everybody to get an edge. Everyone was just happy to be out there. And I think this time around, that's just something a little bit extra, and that's what separates teams, especially at the end of the year. And in a game like this, and a stage like this, just that little extra oomph behind them brings these guys together. I think that's what was missing maybe last year, and now here it is, an edge, a chip on the shoulder for Maryland this year.
I would argue Maryland felt like they had it in the postseason last year, too, because that was the Big Ten thing. It was Big Ten play, the Big Ten only schedule. No one really knew what to make of it because everybody kind of beat everybody up beside Maryland, who just ran the table. And I was talking to Brian Brecht leading into that game against Hofstra, and he brought it up without me asking. in a coach's call, he was like,
from Rutgers, yeah.
From Rutgers.
Yeah.
He's like, we felt like the Big Ten felt like we were kind of disrespected. And you get the feeling, we've seen it with Ohio State in a couple of their big wins. We've seen it with Rutgers, who has a couple of nice victories in the top 10. It felt like this whole conference was like, hold up, wait a minute. Like, I know we had a Big Ten on the schedule, we beat each other up, but we were maybe a little disrespected last year. And it's like they've all come out with something to prove. Now, Maryland proved it last year in the tournament. They got all the way to the championship game. But I do think there's a little bit of that edge that's been carried over for the entire conference, including the Terps, of like, hey, you know what? We are one of the best teams in the country.
The only thing I would say to that is I think it's only working for Maryland right now.
I don't know.
The Big Ten, I'm not all that high on at the moment because you look at like what Maryland has now, the Big Ten schedule here coming up, and you're like, yeah, they go to Penn State. And they've got Rutgers and Ohio State at home. That just doesn't seem like a big challenge for me. From some of those teams that we thought at the beginning of the year, yeah, like they're back and they're good. And, yeah, they have that like Big Ten schedule. But I don't know if Maryland's just been so far above, it feels like all of them. And obviously a lot of other teams too. But in comparison to the rest of the conference.
Well, that's why I said that I think they can run the table. I think Rutgers is the team that poses the biggest challenge to Maryland, strictly because of their scoring. I mean, they hung 22 goals for the second time this week. They've hung 23 already this year. They have and it's against different talent, obviously, but I think they have the scoring ability to, at some point, go goal for goal with Maryland, and then it figures out who can get a stop.
That's why Maryland having that game at home, to me, is important.
Yeah.
They got Ohio State at home, too. So they've got, they go to Penn State, a game you can win this year, and you go to Hopkins, another game you can win this year, and Michigan as well. You go there. So I think their schedule really suits them. You said run the table, and that's why, to me. Their schedule really works to their advantage this time around. Unlike last year's Big Ten schedule,
Princeton,
which worked to nobody's advantage.
Yeah, Princeton's my number 2 team. I bumped them above Virginia because of some of the wins they've had so far this year, and Virginia slid down to number 3 in my poll. They were 5 goals better than Princeton. And I know you can't compare apples to apples in terms of games, but essentially, what they've done against the 2 teams that are below them is
true,
taking care of business.
I don't think the separation's as much as you think it is, despite that result. I don't think the separation's as wide.
Who's going to prove it?
One of these Ivy League
Nobody
teams.
has proved it on the field.
I think these Ivy League teams have what it takes to not necessarily beat Maryland, but give them a sport of it at the end of the time. I don't think Maryland's going to go on like this for the entire tournament, the entire season, that they're that far ahead, head and shoulders everybody else.
We'll see.
They
might be that good.
They could be, potentially,
they might
yes.
Be that good.
I don't know if the game against Virginia completely convinced me of that. It pushed me far in that direction. I don't know if I'm there yet.
Okay.
Because Virginia,
Virginia did it against High Point.
Virginia was number 2 at that point, but they hadn't necessarily played the best competition. They were number 2 in name only.
But I think you looked at. I think obviously, the competition wasn't there. But you look at up and down that roster. It's full of talent.
I agree, and we've gotten to know that talent.
It's not a Duke situation where maybe they've disappointed at times and the talent hasn't exactly shown up. Virginia had shown up in every game until this point.
I think you're right, and yes, Virginia has plenty of talent. I'm not disputing that any way, shape, or form, and we've gotten to know that talent because of their deep tournament runs the last 2 years.
They've won 2 championships in a row.
And the Ivy League we haven't seen in the last 2 years, so you don't know many of those names. There's not as many household guys.
No, you're right.
But they might have plenty. They do have talent. We're learning that here, but just because we haven't seen them doesn't mean they don't have as much or even more talent. Just because we don't know yet. And now they're starting to prove that little by little.
Yeah, you're right.
So I don't know what we settled there, but we settled something.
Anyway, Maryland's really good. That's what we settled.
Yes, I think you're right.
They're really good. Yeah. Wherever you want to put them, they're really good. And right now, the number 1 team.
Right now, you can put them at number 1 for sure. I'm not disputing that any way, shape, or form.
Good. Let's move on to some of the other games that happened in college lacrosse because it was a wild weekend, a lot of fun. Let's start best close game.
Yeah, so this was fun for me on Saturday because I was prepping for the Florida Drexel women's game on Sunday, which was awesome, by the way.
Yeah, it was great.
So I was prepping for that, and I was watching some lacrosse, but also at the same time the NCAA tournament was on. Yeah. And this game, Princeton and Penn, was like in lockstep with North Carolina Baylor. So I'm like flipping channels, going back and forth. I'm like, oh, look at the goal, and then the big comeback for Baylor late in the North Carolina game. I was like, what is going on? So this was wild. The Penn and Princeton game, there was so much in it that I don't necessarily think I expected. I told everybody before that game, I was like, I don't know if Penn can score 14, 15 goals. I was clearly wrong.
Yeah, I was right on this one. I actually underestimated how many goals.
I was clearly wrong. Chris Brown, the sixth goal of the game comes in OT, their first possession there. He gets the game winner. Princeton forced 18 Penn turnovers. Penn still scores 20 goals. And that to me sticks out. Princeton beat Georgetown 10-8.
Yeah.
They beat Rutgers 16-11. They held Rutgers to 11 goals. Penn goes out there and scores 20 against them. Against what we thought was a really good, still think it's a good defense and was a bit of the nature of the game itself, but this was back and forth. There were runs. Cam Rubin from Penn, 7 goals and 2 assists, and he had 4 goals and 2 assists in 5 games prior to this game. Sam Hanley, 3 goals, 8 assists. That's a NLL line, Dane Smith style from Sam Hanley.
Where you get second assists.
Right.
They're only first assists in college lacrosse.
This was such a great game, and I think it told us a lot about both these teams and the fact that Princeton can win a game like this, number one. I thought maybe they were more defensive-minded and would have to hold teams to maybe single digits to make a good run. They can score and run with people, and Penn can too. This seems like this is what Penn does. They will play a close game with anybody, and they'll play to your style. They did it a bit with Georgetown. I know that was more of a slobber knocker.
But it was a close game.
It was a battle, too. And Penn showed me a lot in this game. And I was a little questioning their offense. I mean, they haven't played in a couple years. I didn't really know what their offense was all about. But they got some guys stepping up now that we might see later on in the year. It's still March, don't forget. There's still time for these teams to mature. And Penn very well could be better than we think. And I think they proved that against Princeton despite the loss.
We're going to have to start calling them the Cardiac Quakers. I mean,
Nice.
they had the 1-goal game against Penn State down in Charlotte.
Yeah.
They're playing 1-goal games, exciting left and right.
Yeah. That was fun. It was a good game.
They had the overtime game against Duke, too, that they won. I mean, this team just plays 1-goal games.
And the atmosphere was great at Princeton.
Unreal.
A ton of students were there. It was such a cool game, such a cool atmosphere.
The 2 takeaways I have from this game, they come in that very last play, the overtime goal, and it's the announcers talking about in a 2020 game that the defense had actually been pretty good, which is actually kind of a fair estimate. You went a couple of minutes into overtime before somebody scored. And number 2, the fact that this game, how chaotic it was so fitting that it ends on a guy's stick breaking and he having to run off the field for the goal to finally come in. That was the perfect way for this game to end. It's a bummer for Penn because it's a tough break, but it's the perfect way for a game like this, 21-20 to end.
Yeah, that's how intense it was out there.
Yeah.
The sticks are breaking in overtime. Yeah.
I'm going to stay in the Ivy League for my pick because this league is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Terry Foy mentioned it in his write-up of his top 20 about the Ivy League. And normally you chalk this up to the fact that these teams know each other so well. They play each other every year. But actually, these programs don't know each other all that well because they haven't played each other in 2 years. Because they didn't play last year, and most of them hadn't played each other in 2020 because it was mostly just non-conference play until the season got shut down. So it's been since 2019 since most of these programs who are traditional rivals have played, yet it seems nothing has changed. I'm going to go to the Cornell and Yale game because this leads into our next topic, but it's one that I think I learned a lot about Cornell because the Ohio State win was really nice, but when you take down a Yale program that has done it over the last couple of years that they've had a full season, I think it says a lot about them. Chase Erlin coming up with 18 saves. It was Cornell in control. Yale went on a furious comeback late, but I think it says a lot that when they needed to get stops down the stretch, they were able to. This defense with Gavin Adler, who had 3 ground balls and a couple of caused turnovers, is really impressive. And so the hold on was good, but also the fact that they could build up a 12-5 lead against a team that's as talented as Yale, I think also sends a good sign for Cornell. So this game was exciting for a kind of a different reason. It was one of those, like, if you're a Cornell fan, grip the remote really tight because you don't know what's going to happen. Hold on to your seats. But I think this is a really big win, momentum-wise, for the Big Red. Yeah, and I think it for Yale maybe proves to them that, hey, we can come back in games like this, and we are able to compete with teams that, top 5 in the country. And I think Yale's been sort of their own learning, growing experience this year. I mean, they're like we said before, I think that they're really young and trying to figure out who they are now because it's been a couple years. We knew who they were when they won that championship, and now
a couple years removed from that, you sort of lose some of those guys that were big parts of that. The Jackson Morrells of the world, Matt Gaudette during that run. So you kind of have to recycle and figure out who you are after all this. And I think that now maybe with a run like that and a comeback like that, yeah, there's no moral victories. But at the end of the day, you can say, okay, we did go in there and we thought we were dead and showed us a lot about who we are, what we're all about, and coming back and make that a game late. So I think for Yale, that it is something that you can build on moving forward and that will put them in contention later on this season.
Well, and I think what it shows you, all these games, and we can include the Harvard-Brown game, another great one-goal game this weekend. I mean, I would argue those 6 teams in the Ivy League have to be in the conversation and make an NCAA tournament.
Every single one?
All 6 of them have proven something so far this year, and some of them have better wins than teams we see in the Big Ten and the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, they've made themselves stronger, right? And they're not eating each other, they're not destroying each other, but they've done so well out of conference that now they're going to start competing against each other in really great, exciting ways. So, like you said, my argument for Yale, like they can build on this. Like, how do you drop them that far? You know what I mean? You can.
Yeah, they're all there, and they're all going to have to be in the conversation. Brown beat some people out of conference. Harvard's got a huge game against BU. It's actually happening tonight. We're taping this on Tuesday before the game. We'll talk about that game, I'm sure, on Thursday. But Harvard wins that. Like, you're talking about teams that legitimately have conversations for an at-large berth, and it's going to get taken away from other. The Ivy League may have more berths than anybody else in the country.
And that's just the way
it's probably deserved.
And that's the way things were left in 2020.
You're right.
They pick up right where they left off 2 years later.
All right, game we learned the most from.
Game I learned the most from, Bucknell Loyola. So I think I was just thinking about this. I'm obsessed with the Loyola, I think. I went in, I was high on them, and then I was really disappointed in how they started the season. I was like, oh, what's going on? And now I'm back on the Loyola train.
You're back?
So I am a Loyola guy through and through.
Had you jumped off?
I don't think I was hanging on.
I was
you're
the guy
on the side. At the end of the caboose, on a train. They beat Bucknell, and Bucknell had a really nice start to the season. I think we learned a little. And they're up and coming. Bucknell not there yet. Loyola, on the other hand, this is maybe them coming on a little bit. They lose at the beginning of the season, their first 4 games. They've won their last 3 now. And they win this game with Kevin Lindley, one of their guys, 0 goals on 9 shots. A sophomore midi, Seth Higgins, 3 goals, 3 assists, career highs. He had 4 goals and 2 assists in the prior 6 games he played. Other guys are starting to step up for Loyola. I think that's important for them because I believe they have depth there. It's just about time for them to use it. I have to point out the short stick D midi, Peyton Razanka, 4 ground balls, 2 caused turnovers. The last 3 games he's played, 10 ground balls, 8 caused turnovers. So you have guys like that, game changers, Cam Wires. You've got Schaefer there. I still like their makeup. And now they're unbeaten in the Patriot League. So like we said at the beginning of Patriot League play, you can just scratch everything off the board. If you go and start well in Patriot League, you can move along and be just fine. So they come off of a win over Duke, and then you beat Bucknell. So Loyola's back, everybody, whether you like it or not.
It's what they did last year.
You're right. So they're turning the page, and they're building on it, and now they've got a game against Army on Saturday. So we'll see how they do. Lehigh beat Army this past weekend, and the Patriot League, a fascinating league in that, and we'll see what goes on in that game. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Well, that's the thing. Maybe Loyola's peaking a little bit earlier this year than they did last year, but last year was that Georgetown game toward the end of the year where it felt like they kind of figured it all out. Maybe it was that Duke game where they figured it out. They just did it a little bit earlier this season.
Right. And I learned a lot about it. That showed us a lot, I think. The win. I know Bucknell wasn't exactly on everybody's list as a team to watch out for, but you don't perform that well in the way they did it. I learned a lot about Loyola this weekend.
Well, and I think we're going to learn even more this weekend against Army. I think this is because Army will want to bounce back after the 1-goal loss against Lehigh. I think this one tells us a lot too about Loyola.
Okay, what you got?
I'm going to go to the game that I did on Sunday night, Delaware and Hopkins. It was a 2-goal win for the Blue Hens. And I mentioned this on the broadcast here on LSN, and I was talking to Ben DeLuca on Friday about this game. And despite the fact that they went to Michigan and didn't look good, they got blown out by the Wolverines. They competed well against Duke, but they still lost pretty convincingly down in Durham. And this was a team that came in with top 20 expectations. They were supposed to be one of the top teams of the CAA, and some of those expectations and the talk around this Delaware program had kind of fallen off because of those results. And I'm talking to Ben DeLuca, and he had this confidence about him. He's like, I know there's people aren't talking about us as much anymore, but it's just, I think this is our chance to, like, start going back. And he had this confidence about his team, despite those results, that, like, he felt like he had something. And I think we saw it on Sunday night. Mike Robinson, if you haven't watched this guy play, is unbelievable. And it's more than just the goals. He scores 5 goals, and he scored both times when Hopkins in the fourth quarter tied the game. It's Mike Robinson who put Delaware right back in the lead on the next possession. I think that says a lot about him. But 2, the guy plays face-off wings. He's an attackman, a Division I attackman, who was one of the top goal scorers in the country last year, and he plays wings
like high school
on face-offs.
It's like a high school thing, yeah.
I'm talking to Greg Granley, and I was like, there can't be anybody else in the country that does that. It can't be another starting attackman in the country that also takes face-off wings. He's like Joel Tinney when he was at Hopkins, but Tinney was at least a midfielder.
Right,
He went back and forth a little bit. He is a really, really special talent, one of the leaders of this team. And so to me, this taught, and I know Hopkins has been up and down at the beginning of the year. So having it be a top 20 win for Delaware is nice in perception. And their first ever win, we think, against Hopkins, there was a way back result that Hopkins counted that it was a 1-0 Delaware win. Not sure about that, but essentially their first win in recent memory against the Blue Jays. I think them just putting it all together against another team that is very similar in terms of their talent level, I think was exactly what I needed to see from Delaware to think, all right, they can be the team that walks away out of the CAA and can compete once they get to the national tournament.
Well, I mean, Hopkins coming off a loss to Navy on Friday. That is a mad team you got coming to Delaware. And Delaware able to rise to the occasion through that.
Yeah.
And that's the comeback game for Hopkins, and that's in every way, shape, and form. So for Delaware to get that win, impressive. And Hopkins, at this point, you got to go to the Big Ten and get to the job done, because that's going to be difficult.
Yeah, the other guy that really impressed me from Delaware, and is a guy that people should know in terms of All-American consideration, Owen Grant. A couple of big plays down the stretch caused turnovers to seal that win for Delaware. As you would expect.
Yeah, as you would. Okay, good stuff. Biggest surprise of the weekend. I'll go first.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm not going to say the biggest. I feel like my biggest surprise was the dominance of Maryland over Virginia.
That was a big
I didn't think that was going to be that dominating of a performance. Now we know why. So I'll go with a surprise. And my surprise was the way in which Notre Dame beat Michigan, because that was a 12-7 Notre Dame win. I think people will look at that.
That surprised you?
It did a little bit, because we know that Notre Dame has really struggled in one particular category this year, and that's face-offs. They weren't good in this game either. 7 of 23. They had 6 face-off violations, too. It was not pretty for Notre Dame at the face-off X. You actually were still able to hold Michigan to 7 goals, I think, with all of that. When you're giving up possession that many times, it tells me and showed me a lot about the Notre Dame defense. I don't know if I'm particularly shocked that their defense is solid, but I just feel like in this instance that your defense is being tested time and time again, you're forced to cause turnovers and bad shots. And you really delivered. I mean, Josh Zawada had just 1 goal and 8 shots. Arden Cohen did a great job of him on defensively. Liam Entenmann had 19 saves in that game. So this was a bit of a surprise in the way in which Notre Dame was able to do this and be that impressive in that. I think it's one of their best wins of the season, considering the circumstances and what you have to maybe your self-inflicted wounds and overcome there. They got to find a formula for all that.
But their other win was Detroit, so it better be one of their wins.
That's their second win. Yeah, they played some tough teams.
They have.
So this is their best win of the season.
Yeah.
But the way in which they did it to me was a bit surprising, and that they could get the job done that much on defense, where it was really tasked with trying to get the ball back for that offense.
See, this is exactly the way I thought they were going to win the game. Like this is Notre Dame lacrosse.
It is. I know.
You play defense enough so that you give your goalie an opportunity to make a boatload of saves that they can see, and you score just enough at the other end to wear them out.
I mean, I think I might have expected more from Michigan. That's just how I felt going in. I know that they had struggled they weren't great against Harvard, and now you're getting to see a little bit more of who Michigan is for sure.
Yeah, I think this is a Michigan team that can be really good out of conference until you play some of the athletes that you get in the Big Ten, the ACC,
no, you're right.
and the Ivy League.
I expected more.
Okay.
I'll admit. I expected more out of Michigan, and maybe like a 12-10 game, and 12-7.
I think the big thing to take away is, what does Michigan do now when they play the teams they're going to hit in the Big Ten? Like, do they learn from these experiences and challenge some of the top teams, or does it kind of fade away?
Yeah, and then kind of what the normal thing is there.
Yeah. I'm going to go with another Big Ten team as my biggest surprise. It's Ohio State losing to Denver. This is a Denver team that played a couple of one-goal games the last couple of weeks against Yale and North Carolina, but they've fallen off the map, much like Syracuse in terms of the results early in the season. Just kind of fell by the wayside, outside the top 20. No one's really talking about them. And they just, quietly in a game that I don't think that many people were super hyped up for because of what Denver's done.
Yeah.
Go out there to the horseshoe and they knock off the Buckeyes. This is normally a rivalry that's terrific. And I think for Ohio State, once again, Jack Myers, it's like you can determine what the result's going to be by looking at his stat line. 1 goal and 1 assist on 6 shots.
Coming off a huge weekend last weekend. Notre Dame, right? They beat
when
Notre
they beat Notre Dame. And so for me, the biggest surprise is just, first of all, Denver, I think, showed what the upside, what the ceiling can be for Denver. I think they can compete with some of the best teams in the country. They've shown that now 3 weeks in a row, and they have a win out of one of these top 10 teams. But for Ohio State, the head scratcher is, this is a really well-coached team by Nick Myers. For them to come out like that, and they actually came out really well, and to give up the lead the way they did in the second half surprised me, especially coming off the momentum-boosting win over Notre Dame a week ago.
They've been inconsistent, I guess.
Very.
The best way to put it. You beat North Carolina, you lose to Cornell. You beat Notre Dame, you lose to Denver. Not that they're losing to bad teams, but they get this great win and maybe ride that high, maybe ride it a little bit too high. So they need to get maybe some of those leaders in the locker room to get a little bit more steady, or else, you could get knocked off in a conference tournament or what have you at the end of the year in a way maybe you might like. Because if you keep on riding the ups and downs, the down might hit when it's not supposed to.
Yeah, you need to keep going up throughout the end of the year. I will say, underrated face-off battle that wasn't talked enough about going into this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Stathakis against Ignacio. Stathakis, just the edge, went 14-27, went 52%. And that was just enough for them to get a couple extra possessions. They trailed, I think it was 6-2 in that game, able to find their way back to win 14-12, Denver did. And Richie Connell, the Richmond transfer, who had done really nothing all year, 3 goals coming into this game, goes off for 4 goals and 5 shots. If he can provide another spark offensively, which I think that's one of the reasons Denver brings him in to be a goal scorer. He was a terrific man-up guy for the Spiders as well throughout his first couple of years there at Richmond. If he can provide another spark offensively to the guys like Jack Hanna and J.J. Silstrop that they already have proven, I think that would be a big boost for Denver going into the Big East.
Yeah, I think that face-off that tells the story, that stat, and Ohio State may be forced into a situation they're not necessarily used to because they're used to winning 68, 69%, whatever Ignacio was at. So that could have been also another recipe for the loss in that game. So interesting, and another interesting weekend. Some results I don't think I was expecting, and you either.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. Speaking of Denver, we've got Jack Hanna joining us now. Oh, speaking of Denver, we have Jack Hanna joining us now. Jack, thanks for taking some time. An Ohio kid going to Columbus and beating Ohio State. I have to feel like that feels good. How did it feel on Sunday?
Well, it was absolutely a dream come true, Over the last couple of years, I haven't really got to play against Ohio State since my freshman year when I wasn't on the field much. So finally getting to be out there playing against the Buckeyes, especially in the shoe, being a kid that grew up in Ohio, the shoe's a special place. So it was a really special experience.
That's awesome. In terms of the different venues you've played in, is that one of the cooler ones that you've gotten to go and participate while in person there?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I was a Ohio State Buckeyes football fan growing up. So, the shoe is, everyone talks about it. It's awesome when you go. When you go to those games when you're a little kid, it feels magical. So, you can actually get to be inside of it and playing on that field and everything was really a special experience.
And winning, I'm sure, added on to all that.
Oh, yeah. That was the icing on the cake. That felt really good.
How important was that win for you guys at this point in the season?
I think it was a huge win. Obviously, we've had a couple tough ones in a row, but I think we know how good of a team we are, and we just need to get ourselves in a roll, get things in the winning column, and it was a great start.
Yeah, you guys in the locker room coming off the 1-goal losses to Carolina and Yale, did it feel like you guys had something to prove against a top 10 team?
Absolutely, and we know we belong up there, but we know we haven't proved our way to be up there right now. Which is, you gotta win games to get ranked high, and you gotta win games for everyone to respect you. But we know where we deserve to be at and where we feel like we should be at. So, we knew that those games needed to come out as wins, but they're also learning experiences that are going to help us moving forward. So, yeah, we definitely had a chip on our shoulder moving forward, and we're going to continue to have that.
You've got 3 goals and an assist in each of your last 3 games, Jack. What changed? Did anything change for you in the last sort of stretch here to amplify things for you a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I was having a little bit of shooting troubles at the start of the season, but that happens. Little injuries here and there that caused some problems with the shooting stroke and things like that. But overall, just had to get back to the drawing board, work on some things, watch some film, work on my shot selection, things like that. Continue to work as a full team unit and not try to do too much of my own, which I was getting myself caught in doing a little bit earlier in the season. So, just working with the coaches, doing my best to help us win games and, doing what I can.
And obviously, you've been doing this for a while now, as a 5th-year guy at Denver. But even the fact is, I think a lot of people look at teams that might have these, 5th-year graduate students and say, oh, they got it all figured out. But it's just a testament that lacrosse is very difficult, right? Like, it's not an easy sport, and you have to continually to, hone your craft, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's lacrosse is constantly changing. You get in grooves, you get out of grooves. I think that's just athletics as a whole, too. You hit slumps, you don't feel good about maybe some skills that you used to feel really good about. So, you just got to keep working at it and keep improving every day and kind of stay at the grindstone. If being a 5th year has taught me anything, it's definitely that, you can't start relaxing when you feel like you got things figured out. You got to stay at it and keep working on those things every single day.
Speaking of grooves, you guys going into the second half against Ohio State, it looked like it was going to be a very different game than what ended up. What was the flip that switched for you guys in the third quarter of that game on Sunday?
I think we just knew the whole time that we were going to win the game. We felt that we were going to win the game throughout. We had a rough start. I think had the face-off X, we hit a groove. I think our wing play hit a groove. We started playing well in transition and things just started clicking, and then everyone started feeling better and better as things went out. And then obviously the offense started putting the ball in the back of the net at a pretty rapid pace there a couple times there. But I just think throughout the whole game we felt good. I think we just kind of hit our stride in the second half.
Where did that confidence come from?
I think it comes from the week. We work hard all week. We practice all week. We're watching film all week. We're doing all sorts of different stuff. The coaches have instilled that confidence in us, and we feel like we win every single game. So, we're never going to feel like, even if we are behind in a game, we feel like we're going to be able to win that game. So that's just, that's the process of playing sports, I guess.
Richie Connell, a transfer from Richmond, a guy who kind of joined you guys just in time for this season. Does it feel like after this game that maybe the offense with him is clicking a little bit differently than it did at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. Richie had a great game. He shot the ball very well. And that's what he does really well. That's what he did when he was at Richmond, and it's what he's going to continue to do for us. Week in, week out, things change, things move around. We have a lot of depth. We got a lot of different guys that can play. But yeah, Richie played great, and I want him to continue to play great because that helps us out. That helps them out. That's what we want moving forward.
How different is this group this year compared to last year? You had a bunch of the transfers come in. I know Richie obviously is a transfer too, but that just piqued my thought process. And the group that you have this season compared to maybe last year, where you had some different parts in there.
Yeah, it's definitely, obviously every year is a little bit different, but I think this year was definitely, in my 5 years has been the biggest change of, I think the biggest issue, I wouldn't call it an issue, but the biggest change was that we lost, 3, veteran leaders that had been leading us for 3 years. At least Danny Logan was our captain for 3 years. And, obviously he's an amazing player, and you're Ethan Walker and Colin Squires, and you have the Jackson Morals coming in like that. And, that's a lot of guys that control the game, control locker rooms, control huddles, that are really, really versed in winning games. And when you lose them all at once, it leaves you a little bit of a gap in leadership that I personally had to figure out, had to work on, had to get better at. And Teddy and Adam Hanglin are other captains as well. We've just had to do a better job learning to do that. But it's all been a learning experience from missing those guys out a little bit, but that happens.
You mentioned being a fifth-year guy, and you go to Denver because you want to compete against the best and be one of the best teams in the country. And in your conference, a lot of the talks about Georgetown, and deservedly so. They've kind of stolen that mantle from you guys in terms of owning the Big East over the last couple of years. How much, being a fifth-year guy, does that drive you guys to want to get to the top when because, I mean, that's what you go to this program to be part of.
Yeah, it's a massive driving force for us, for sure. All sights ahead on the Big East. And people are going to talk about Georgetown more. They're going to talk about us in the Big East because they beat us in the Big East. That's just how it works. You lose it every year. No one's going to think you're going to win it every year. So we're going to figure it out. We're going to turn things around. But that's a massive driving force for us. We're ready to try to take that helm back.
And it strikes me when you say that. I was reading an article where Bill Tierney called you the most competitive man he's ever coached in 41 years. I mean, that's saying a lot. There's a lot of guys he's coached in 41 years. Jack, what's that mean to you?
It means a lot coming from him. Obviously I've kind of known it personally for a while, but I think the biggest thing Coach T's done is help me kind of rein in my emotions, rein in my competitiveness, and use it in the right way. When you're younger and you get a little more angry and things like that, you lose control, you lose focus on the things that matter. And I think Coach T recognized that, and he's helped me a ton in being able to kind of channel competitiveness, bringing the best out of others, and bring the best out of myself.
What are you the most competitive at off the field? Like, are you like a big chess guy? Like, what do you like to compete at outside of lacrosse?
Just about anything with my brothers. I got an older brother, and he grew a little bit earlier than I did. He's a couple years older than me, so I never really beat him in anything. I would say the biggest competitive thing we probably do is either darts or cornhole. We're big backyard games, stuff like that. So my older brother, he gets me in cornhole quite a bit, but been working on my game recently. When I get back to Ohio, I think I got his number.
Yeah, I mean, he could come out this weekend. Apparently, it's supposed to be 80 degrees out there in Denver. Maybe
I know. I'm sure Ohio's
post-game
tailgate nice.
So you're a Cincinnati guy, right?
Yep.
How big of a Joe Burrow fan are you?
Joe Burrow's the truth. Joe Burrow's the man.
What did that run to the Super Bowl mean to the city of Cincinnati?
It was I don't think I stopped hearing about Joe Burrow from my high school friend group and all my buddies back in Cincinnati for just about the entire football season. Once the playoffs hit, it was if I was in a room with you, you probably wouldn't hear from me because I was probably texting somebody about Joe Burrow and the Bengals as football was going on.
What is it about him?
I don't know. He's just got that aura. He's got something about him that I think everyone likes. Everyone sees it, It's I don't know. It's Joe Burrow. It's Joey franchise. He's got something about him.
He's a winner, right? He's a guy that wins,
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I tell you what, especially the college age person I think I encountered around the Super Bowl, everybody loves Joe Burrow. He's like this generation's Joe
Namath?
Yeah,
he's built up, and it's hard not to love him.
Absolutely. I hope it keeps going too, as a Bengals fan. I think he's going to be the man for many years to come. I think it's going to keep growing. So, the guy came off his ACL surgery, had a killer year. I think it's just going to keep getting better from there,
Give you some more bragging rights around Russell Wilson land that you're in now. So, it could be a fun season.
Oh yeah. I've been hearing too much that this past season was a fluke. I'm ready for Joe to show everybody we're just getting started.
Love it.
Well, Jack, we think you may just be getting started there at Denver with the win you had over the weekend. We appreciate the time. Good luck the rest of the way. Hopefully we'll catch up sometime here down the road.
Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Big Joe Burrow fan, Jack Hanna.
Apparently.
Most of the city of Cincinnati and a good portion of the younger generation of America.
I didn't get a chance to ask him if he was a big Ohio Machine fan back in the day. Tom Schreiber, if he was the Joe Burrow before Joe Burrow, Tom Schreiber with the Ohio Machine, I can see that.
That Machine team that won the title in 2017 in Texas that had Schreiber and Holman and Harrison and Scotty Rogers and Kyle Bernlohr, that team is one of my favorite pro lacrosse teams of all time.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun.
They're just a team you wanted to root for.
Yeah, Bear Davis.
Connor Cannizzaro, I think, was part of that team.
I think so.
Yeah, shout out to Denver, by the way.
Yeah,
there you
Denver.
go.
Okay,
so
let's move on. Yeah, we got other things to talk about, including another unbelievable matchup in the women's game. We had Boston College, North Carolina, Alumni Stadium. I was there. It was incredible. I'll first off say it was incredible atmosphere.
Atmosphere is incredible.
It was really cool, to have that there in the football field, in the football stadium, and have that many people. They had everybody on one side, and it was spilling over to the rest of the stadium by the time things were going. The ups and downs. It felt like an NCAA tournament game, a semifinal, if not a final.
Might be more people than BC gets for a football game sometimes.
It's true.
It was a tremendous crowd, and it set the stage for what was the game of the year in women's college lacrosse, and the game, by the end, lived up to it.
Yeah, it did. And by the end, you're right. It almost went the way I kind of felt it would go.
See, I thought it was going to go opposite. I really did feel like it was going to be Boston College that may have jumped out, and it was North Carolina that was going to be the team that was clawing back just because of the atmosphere and being at home. But it went the opposite, and BC was the one that came up just a goal short at the end.
Yeah. So my biggest takeaway from this one are transfers, and I think that they're talked about ad nauseum, but you can't underestimate the importance they play, and especially this game. And don't forget, Charlotte North's a transfer, Rachel Hall's a transfer.
It's easy to forget.
That's all on the Boston College side of things. Courtney Taylor also a transfer. I'm focusing on the ones for North Carolina, who, as we know, depth is huge for them. And with these transfers, they make the difference here because you got Andy Aldave, 4 goals from Notre Dame. Olivia Dirks, 2 goals, 2 assists. She had 5 draw controls. She comes out of Penn State. Sam Geyersbach has come on for North Carolina. She has found her space, and her spin move along goal line extended is one of the prettiest things I've ever seen in lacrosse this year. She comes from Richmond, And to me, just the ability for them to add that depth at, it seems like, almost every position on a yearly basis. We know going into this year, you have to close the door to the people knocking on the door to North Carolina to go transfer there in the portal, wherever it might be, and to have it open as a crack for some of these to come in. They already have talent. We know that. But to add more depth, that's how you win games like this, because you get contributions and you get one more person or 2 more people for Boston College and that defense to think about. And that just is so hard to overcome, even with Charlotte North on the other side.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, because that's exactly what I had written down in the transfers in terms of the depth of proven stars. Because whether they played at North Carolina or elsewhere a year ago, Andy Aldave and Olivia Dirks were stars before they got to North Carolina, and now they just provide more stars for an already star-studded team. The stat that stands out to me from this game is North Carolina scored 16 goals. And the starting attack unit for the Tar Heels was held to 5 points. How many other teams in the country can have their starting attack unit that scores a lot? Like, this isn't a team that is just midfield driven. This is a team that has Jamie Ortega at attack, who's one of the best attackers in the country. And to have that unit held to 5 points, and you still score 16 goals. There may be no other teams in the country that could do that, because you hold BC's attack unit to 5 points, they're not getting to 15 or 16 goals.
No.
Because Charlotte North is so important. So that depth, I think, is what, and like Boston College is a deep team compared to most other teams in the country. They have tremendous depth of scoring, and we saw it again on display on Sunday. Teams like Northwestern and Syracuse and Maryland, they've got depth of talent and people that can put the ball in the back of the net. But nobody can do what North Carolina can do, and that was, I thought, was going to be the difference a year ago, and is once again the difference now in the regular season this year.
Yeah, you wonder about the rematch, the inevitable rematch that we're going to have here. And to me, that late run by Boston College probably helped North Carolina more than anything. If North Carolina wins this by 4 or 5 goals, it's like you don't have as much to work on. You don't have much, even the mental component. You don't have as much to say, hey, guys, we didn't do that. Now you can say, oh, we let them back in. Here's a situation in which we were a woman up, and yet Charlotte North still was able to break through our double teams. How do we fix that? They presented themselves, unfortunately, to their fault, with some situations that maybe they wouldn't have countered unless Boston College came back to that game, which will help North Carolina in the rematch. Now I'm leaning a little bit towards Carolina winning that next game. Whereas if it was the other way around, where it was about 4 or 5 goals, I think Boston College might have said, okay, here's what we have to do differently this time. We'll get them the next time around.
Well, yeah, because it's almost like it's a teaching moment in what is still your biggest win. And so instead of just feeling this, obviously they have to feel so great that they get that win over the team that was number 1. But there's also this little thing that in the back of your head as a player for North Carolina goes, maybe we got lucky at the end because we did let them get back in it and we let them score some goals we probably shouldn't have. So it's there's a little edge to it as opposed to just this, oh yeah, we got it done and we are the best team in the country.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, at the same time,
they are the best
flip
team
side,
in the country.
Boston College can say, hey, we were 1 goal away. We came back when no one else thought we would. We can do this. There is belief there we can beat this team. You just have to do a few other things a little bit better.
Yeah. Great game.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was fun.
That was really cool.
Yeah, it was like you said, you could feel the momentum swings. The crowd in that stadium was great, and it lived up to the hype, which sometimes it always doesn't. And I say this all the time. I remember we've talked about this before, but don't forget about these games when we get to the tournament. Too often, and you see it in the NCAA tournament all the time with the big games that you have, the epic overtimes. Don't forget some of these regular season games that are so epic. Penn Princeton, we talked about that for the men, and now this great BC North Carolina game. Treasure this and enjoy it now. That's all I want. That's all I'm asking. Because don't forget all this when the tournament comes.
No, but see, I will. I do say the two number 1 versus number 2s this weekend, whether it was in Audi Field in DC that had more than 10,000 fans, or at BC,
with 10,000 fans.
Yeah, they felt big.
Yeah,
like it felt like stages that were fit for those games. And some of it has to do with the weather. Both days were nice in both locations, and it all worked. But it felt big. And when you have that many people in a stadium, honestly, quite frankly, even the Delaware Hopkins game that had right around 2,000 fans, and it was a loud, vocal crowd on a Sunday night, felt big. I love the fact that some of these March games feel big. They feel like tournament atmospheres, which is, I think is just a really good sign for the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And that only sets the stage for later on in the NCAA tournament. I just don't want the tournament to define the season beyond anything anybody remembers. Sometimes that happens too often.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go to the rest of the women's game.
Oh, yeah, we have more.
Stock up, stock down. So we're going to pick a team that improved their stock over the last week, team that maybe took a dip. Who do you got stock up?
James Madison University, and they
beat
Virginia 16-14, and this was a game they were dominating. They were up 16-9. Virginia made a late run, but JMU, what a great win there. Now they have 3 top 25 wins. So when it looked at times like, I don't know, JMU has to get in via that large bid. They can't play in the CAA tournament, as you know. So you got 3 top 25 wins now. You have an opportunity at more. You do go to Maryland Saturday, and maybe they do have another game of a top 25 team. Maybe at the end of the season, it could be Drexel.
Yeah.
So now JMU on the up and up. Isabella Peterson doing it all. We talked about it before. She had another 6 goals, something like that, and she has been really good for them and where their offense flows through. She's having a good day. They can score some goals. So that is what is going to be the recipe for success. And now starting to get their path to the tournament.
I hope that the selection committee on the women's side, if JMU is the top team in the CAA regular season and they can't compete in the tournament, I hope what they've done in the non-conference and that fact and the fact that they're not allowed to compete in the tournament, I hope they get a benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
I really do. The same thing with Stony Brook in the American East.
The kids deserve it, and it's not their fault.
It isn't their fault.
No.
All right. For me, I'm going to go Stanford. What a weekend for Stanford. They go Friday, Sunday, 2 impressive wins. First, they beat Arizona State. He was coming off that victory over Colorado. I was calling, where's the love for the Sun Devils? I still think there should be some more love, but a really good win for Stanford, 19-11 on Friday. And then they go take on USC on Sunday and win in overtime for a top 25 victory, 15-14. Ashley Humphrey, we talked about her entering this weekend, 15 combined points. She went off for 8 points against Arizona State, 7 more against USC. Ali Bayako, who's obviously the known returner, one of the veteran standouts for Stanford, scored 5 goals as you would expect against Arizona State, held to just 2 against USC, but they're still able to put up 15 goals. I think that's an important step for Stanford.
Yeah, every game to me for Stanford is an opportunity for them to get better. And they have the highest ceiling, it feels like, compared to a lot of these teams, and a lot of potential that they're starting to tap into here.
They had some of those struggles when they came east here early on. They've now won 4 in a row. So Cardinal on the way up.
All right, keep an eye on them in the Pac-12. All right, stock down.
You want me to go?
Yeah.
So Syracuse got a win over Virginia Tech over the weekend, but They went to Florida as part of a spring break trip, and they lost to the Gators in the middle of the week. We talked about it on Thursday, 14-10. So I'm going to go stock down for the Orange. And it's not just because of the results from this week, because they went 1-1. You lose to Florida on the road. It's not like it's a bad loss. They're still a top 10 team. But when Syracuse looks up and you see North Carolina and Boston College play the game they did on Sunday, you have to compare yourself because that's where you want to be. It's where you were last year, competing against those teams in the Final Four. If you're going to win a championship, you got to go through those teams. And when you look at that depth on Sunday and you say, how do we compete against that? And I think the defense and the goalie play has to be better. And then you look at a situation, they ran into a hot goalie in Sarah Resnick in Florida, and they only scored 10 goals in a midweek game on Wednesday. I think it's stocked down not only because they went 1-1 for the week, but because of where I think the trajectory needs to be for Syracuse. I think this is a moment where if you're the Orange, you have to look inside and go, okay, what do we need to do in order to compete against that? Because that's the level we need to be at.
Well, are we getting closer to that top tier or farther away from
right.
the top tier? Or are you just, sort of staying the same and they're continuing to ascend?
After this week, they're not closer.
Right.
Let's just say that.
Absolutely right. And I'm going to say the same thing about my team that I'm giving a stock down to is Princeton, who, yes, they've won their last 3 games. They beat USC 18-13. San Diego State, we talked about this last week, 27-18 was the score. They'd allow 18 goals to San Diego State. And then you have a tough game against Penn State where you got to come back. 12-11 they win over there in Happy Valley. Penn State went down a 6-0 run between the second and third to take an 8-7 lead. Princeton had to get a goal from Sophie Whiteway with 32 seconds left there. But for me, I was the guy saying, where's the love for Princeton, as Travis was saying it for Arizona State last week. Princeton, maybe seen as the class of the Ivy League this year, needs to start acting like it, in my estimation. That, like we said, the top of the cream of the crop is sending away from everybody, and Princeton has to start making their inroads and maybe looking a little better is what I'm asking for out of Princeton with some of these games that maybe they should be handling these teams in a little bit better fashion. So opportunity on Wednesday when they take on Loyola. So that will be a heavyweight matchup of which some of these teams that are hovering between 9th and 10th, I think Loyola is 7th in the nation right now, between some of these top 10 teams looking to move their way up and get themselves maybe a nice seed for the NCAA tournament. Just start making those inroads where you can maybe find yourselves, with a good enough bid and a good enough draw at the end of the season where you can maybe make a run and get yourselves into that Final 8, Final 4 conversation. And this, a game on Wednesday, should be important to that. Princeton has to start playing like that soon.
Just try to not play North Carolina or Boston College before you get to the Final Four.
Avoid that part of the bracket, I guess, as they say.
Yeah.
Just stay away.
If we learned anything in the college lacrosse this weekend, I think we learned that Maryland, I think, is above everybody else on the men's side with what they did against Virginia. And I think it's Carolina and BC and everybody else on the women's side.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Until somebody proves us different.
Which they could. You never know. We're still in the middle of March. So we're saying this here on March 22nd.
Yep.
And we still got 2 more months to go.
We will find out. It's going to be a fun stretch here.
But we got conference play
coming up.
That's going to be interesting how these teams start matching up with each other after some have done well, some haven't done so well in out-of-conference play.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll be with you around for the ride. A bunch of great midweek games this week to check out. We mentioned the BU-Harvard game, a couple of good ones on the women's side as well. Carolina's got one. So we'll talk about all those games coming up on Thursday on Lacrosse Now. So make sure you tune back then.
Midweek moments, maybe multiple.
We may have to.
Yeah.
But that's all the time we have for this week. We'll see you on Thursday.